Thank you for accessing this Bible teaching video. I'm Jim Hendricks, and the following brief teaching concerns the belief that the Messiah was to bring peace to the earth. God made a covenant with Abraham. In that covenant, God made Abraham three primary promises. He promised to grow his descendants into a great nation, give them a land, and from the land and nation bring to the whole world a blessing, which would reverse the curse of sin. The blessing would come to be the great Messianic Hope. The divine scriptures rising from that covenant expanded upon the promise of the blessing. This blessing would become the Messiah and be a descendant of King David. Isaiah the prophet in chapter 11 says, "There would become a descendant of David who would rule in righteousness and faithfulness. In his day, the wolf also shall dwell with the lamb, the leopard shall lie down with the young goat. They shall not hurt nor destroy, and all my holy mountain, for the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord as waters cover the seas." The prophet Micah also proclaimed the Messianic hope in chapter 4. "They shall beat their swords into plowshares, their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more." Micah saw peace at last coming to the earth. This is part of the Messianic hope. Other prophets also envisioned this hope, that one day peace would come to the earth. If the Messiah was to bring peace to the earth, why is it that some say Jesus was the Messiah? If Jesus was the Messiah, why did he not bring peace to the earth? In the first century, Israel was oppressively controlled by the Roman Empire. The Romans were despised and hated by the Jewish population. The presence of the Roman soldiers and the influx of Gentiles was blamed for the decline in morals and religious observance. Many living under this oppression longed that someone, preferably the Messiah, would rise up in a military revolt and drive the Romans from the Holy Land. It was in this political atmosphere that Jesus began his ministry. His message was one of peace. "Love your enemies," he said. "Do good to those who persecute you and abuse you." He taught that the Romans should be loved and accepted. His teaching was not well received. When he preached this inclusive message of peace in his hometown of Nazareth, they attempted to throw him off over a cliff. In his brief ministry, Jesus gathered a sizable, loyal following. Near the end of his ministry, he rode into Jerusalem not on a war horse at the head of an army, but upon a lowly donkey, the symbol of peace. He and his message of peace, though, were rejected. He was arrested and condemned to die by crucifixion on a cross. 50 days later, at the Feast of Shavuot, his followers boldly proclaimed Jesus was not dead, but he had risen and ascended back into heaven. Through his death and resurrection, forgiveness of sin and eternal life were now available through faith in him. Thousands from Jerusalem and Judea embraced the faith, and soon it spread into the Roman Empire. Their growth was explosive. With the approach of peace rejected, about 38 years later, a military revolt erupted against Rome. Roman legions were sent to put the revolt down. Jerusalem was captured and the temple destroyed. The revolt was brutally suppressed, but the appetite for war was not. Less than 60 years later, a second revolt occurred. The leading rabbi of the time, Rabbi Akiva, impressed by the physical strength of a warrior named Bar Kokhba, proclaimed him to be the Messiah. One possible reason for proclaiming Bar Kokhba to be the Messiah may have, in part, been a national psychological need to counter the claim of the Christians that Jesus was the Messiah. With Bar Kokhba, Israel now would show to the world who was the true Messiah. So the Messiah of peace, then, was rejected for a Messiah of war. The actions of Rabbi Akiva and Bar Kokhba was devastating to the Jewish nation. With the path of peace rejected and the path to war embraced, Rome had had enough. The Roman armies were sent back again, and Jerusalem and Judea were decimated, and many sold as slaves into captivity. It is incongruous to say that Jesus could not have been the Messiah because he did not establish world peace. It is much like what was said at his crucifixion. When Jesus was crucified on the cross and in the throes of death, some surrounding the cross said, "He saved others, himself he cannot save. If he's the King of Israel, let him now come down from the cross, and we will believe him." Similarly, Jesus preached and called for peace with Rome. He refused to take up the sword. Today there are those who say Jesus did not bring world peace, therefore he cannot be the Messiah. We cannot reject the policies and teachings of peace, choose war instead, and when peace does not come, then turn and discredit the one who calls for peace. Jesus' message of peace has gone out into all the world. Sadly and regrettably, many like Israel of old continue to choose war. One day, Jesus will return and impose God's kingdom of peace. Then the earth will be full of the knowledge of God as waters cover the sea.